Hey listeners, we're nearing the end of our 15th anniversary fundraising campaign, and we need your help to meet our goal. This campaign offers you a chance to win a unique food and music experience in one of the most exciting cities in America. Here's how it works. Donate to HRN and you'll be entered to win dinner for two and 2 tickets to a concert in one of 8 amazing cities: New York, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, Nashville, Las Vegas, Charleston, Ardmore, Pennsylvania, and Asheville. All donations support our work educating food system storytellers. And when you donate, you can choose one of those cities and you'll be entered to win dinner and 2 tickets to a show. So help us reach our goal and enter to win dinner and a show in the city of your choice. Check out heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. That's heritageradionetwork.org/15. Thank you.
I'm Lisa Held, a food journalist and podcast host, presenting Behind the Label with American Humane. Produced by Heritage Radio Network for Springer Mountain Farms, this podcast series dives into what the American Humane Certified label really means. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
It's September, and as the days get shorter and temperatures cooler, it's time to go back to school. This week on Meat and Three, we're looking at how lunchtime is changing from elementary schools through college, whether classes are remote or in person.
While there was some information about where families could access food, it was spread out on many different websites.
I'm seeing people, advocate for going back into school, and a main reason is, food insecurity. Kids go to school and they get fed, and that's a whole other thing of fight for kids to be fed versus going to school.
Tune in to Meat and Three, HRN's weekly food news roundup, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Welcome to the Grape Nation, your weekly wine journey. Our guest is Krista Scruggs. We'll talk to Krista about the world we live in, Zafa wines, Cellars, and more. I'm your host, Sam Ben-Ruby. Stay with us for the Grape Nation on the Heritage Radio Network. We bring wine to the people. Born and raised in California, Krista Scruggs eventually made her way east to Vermont. Along the way, she worked on her grandfather's farm, took a job with a big wine company, worked harvests in Europe, and cut her teeth at La Garagista. Krista is a true vigneron. She is co-owner of Zafa Wines and Co-Wine Cellars in Vermont. She is at the forefront of the new American wine revival, working with hybrid grapes, apples, other fruits, co-fermentations, and a commitment to sustainable, regenerative farming, along with low-intervention winemaking. You gotta love someone whose slogan is, just fucking fermented juice. Welcome to the Grape Nation, Krista.
Thank you for having me, Sam. I just chuckled at my slogan.
Yes, even when you hear it, it sounds cool.
Yeah.
Due to the COVID-19 virus, we try to do interviews in the studio at the Heritage Studios at Roberta's, but now we're doing everything remote via Zencaster. So, Krista, just confirming, you're in Vermont right now, right?
I am. I'm in Isle Lamont.
Right.
Yeah.
Which Isle Lamont is a little island in Lake Champlain? Not little, but
it's little. It's the most, and it's the most northern. And we're equidistant. I'm equidistant to Montreal as I am now to Burlington.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
So that is north.
Yeah.
So it's not right outside of Burlington. It's up a little.
Yeah, it takes about from the car takes about an hour 10 from Cellars, for example, if you leave from there.
One of my sons went to college up in Burlington, so we're very familiar with it.
UVM or Champlain?
Champlain.
Yeah.
All right, so I want everyone to know who you are. So I want you to give me a brief background on your journey in life and wine that got you to really where you are today, Isle Lamont, Vermont, owning Zafa Wines and Co-Cellars. So give me a little run through on that.
Born and raised in the Central Valley of California, the farming belt of California. I literally grew up across the street from one of Gallo's tank farms.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't realize that until, it didn't hit me until actually I was in California earlier. It was last year that I was there visiting my grandmother, and I knew I grew up around, there's grapevines around, but I thought they were table grapes, I think, when I was a kid, not realizing that, it was Gallo. And that context became, I think it's the context of that is, falls on me, and the fact that, I eventually ended up working for Constellation Brands. While I was working for Constellation Brands, the tank farm location, production location in Madera, I was also living in Oakland, and it was around the same time that Ordinaire had opened, and I was working for Constellation Brands while being a patron and tasting with the guys at gals at Ordinaire, not knowing that I was drinking a wine, now we refer to as natural wine, while also working for the largest conventional wine manufacturer one of the largest in the world. And so while I was working for Constellation Brands, tasting wines I was tasting at Ordinaire, I really didn't know that I was, quote unquote, tasting natural wine. I knew I was falling in love with wine in a different way that I was, for example, drinking it with my grandmother, i.e. Robert Mondavi, growing up. That more or less, being in the inside, working for Constellation Brands, and then, learning from wine on my own, and on my own way, I decided to leave Constellation Brands, and I wanted to learn particularly how to grow from people who were growing. And so that just led me on a journey, learning how to prune in the state of Washington with a small grower there, and then bouncing around to Italy, a very profound experience in Cahors, and then to Texas. And then that led to a staging with Deirdre, all this, when I left France.
Deirdre Heekin in Vermont, which is,
correct. Yeah.
A big, important connection for you to Vermont.
A huge. I mean, I moved to Vermont solely after leaving France. I knew that, I was doing the UC Davis extension program at the same time too. And I knew that I wanted to grow. I knew that I financially didn't have the means, or didn't feel it was going to be possible to do that in California. And 3, I was looking specifically to stage with someone that could teach me what I wanted to learn, which is what I continued to learn, which was to farm with organic biodynamic practices and minimal intervention in the cellar. And in America, there's not many. At the time, there's still not many that fall within that umbrella, as opposed to those who make wine, quote unquote, conventionally. And Deirdre happened to be in California a couple of months after return from France, and I told her the long-winded story that I'm telling you right now, and asked her the opportunity to stage with her, and that, the way the stars align and circumstances fell, that led into a job offer for me to go work out in Vermont with her and Caleb. And I was always with the contingency that I would, eventually start my own label, and they always supported me procuring my own land. It just, that was a 5-year plan, and here I am 4 years later, and everything happened.
Yeah, but 4 years, you've been doing it a couple. So it was really a couple, and then a couple years later.
Exactly. Yeah. I did 1 year full on with her and Caleb, and, and them trusting me to apply already the knowledge that I acquired up to that point, and a lot, and then that turned into my first vintage in 2017 that I released while also working with Deirdre, or I debuted. It never really got far, but it got far enough that basically fast forward this journey quicker than I think we all expected it to move forward.
Right.
Yeah.
So you made wine while working with her at her facilities.
Correct. Yeah.
When you felt you were ready to, give it your own shot, right?
Yeah, I felt just as ready as as anyone would. I think it
Right.
was more or less I think it was more or less just to have the, the vouching of her, someone that I truly, respect and admired and was learning from, and she felt that I, had the chops to do it. I think that would give anyone some confidence.
Sure. So you're right in the middle of harvest right now. I mean, it's pretty much harvest in the United States. I mean,
Yeah.
you must think I'm crazy for pulling you out of the fields, but you said yes.
I did say yes.
You did say yes, and I had to chase you down a little, but that was my pleasure. So this is your third vintage, second? As
Third,
Zafa?
so
Third.
17, 18, 19. No, this is technically be the fourth vintage. 'Cause,
Fourth.
yeah, the first wine I actually made was not in Vermont. The first wine I made was in Texas.
Right.
And that ended up being Don Quixote, and that wine only saw New York. We ended up releasing it in mid 2018, but technically, people don't realize that. Yeah, my first wine that I made was in Texas. Is that before I went out to do the staging with Deirdre, I had accepted an opportunity in Texas, and that was where how the story was supposed to go, and I just couldn't turn down an opportunity not to work with Deirdre. And then when the opportunity presented itself, I treated Texas for up until this year as more or less my southern hemisphere. So I will go out to Texas, process, and start going there in July, and then I will fly back here and then hop right into harvest here.
Right.
But since I just recently acquired my Zafa's own land here in Vermont, that I couldn't do that this year.
Right.
It's not
So
gonna happen anytime soon.
we'll talk about that in length in a minute. But take me full circle here, because you don't have to get into what it is, because again we'll talk about it later. But when and how did Co-Cellars happen?
Co-Cellars came about just me. It was right after I was managing after I left La Garagista to commit myself fully to Zafa, while still managing another vineyard. And I needed facility to produce in, and Shacksbury, who I was friends with, we're all friends out here.
Shacksbury cider, legendary.
Cider.
Right.
Yeah, and we are all friends here. And I was out there, the cider at the cidery, and I told him I was looking for, space to at least to do alternate proprietorship, and then around that same time, a space opened in Burlington, presented as a co-making space for creatives, and they asked if I wanted to team up with them, and it was just going to be originally just Zafa and Shacksbury sharing a space for their wild opera project, and then for Zafa's full production, and then along the way we created a another brand, and decided to not only to share a space but to produce together, and
right. And that was a couple of years ago?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And that's thriving in Burlington right now, right?
In Burlington, and people are receiving it well across the United States too.
Yeah. Nice. All right. So I want to go over a whole bunch of things with you. You were recently on the Today Show, which was really nice. You've been receiving, well, yeah, I mean, I want to get into that. You've been receiving a lot of great notices. Sometimes people look at you sort of as an overnight sensation, because they didn't know about you or never heard of you doesn't mean you didn't exist or put the sweat in. Does that drive you crazy after everything you had to do to get here?
Yeah, and then it does, and then it doesn't now, just as much as it did, especially a couple years ago. I think now at this point in time, if my wines weren't holding up to, if I hate the fucking word, but holding up to the word hype, then I think that I would have been weeded out. If I'm pretty transparent in my Instagram, people know that I'm putting in the work. I wouldn't be in, to have someone like, for example, Jenny Lefcourt, have me in her book. I think I have the vouch around me from the people who support me. And also I think honestly, I have to tell myself this, but I mean, you guys would have kicked me out a long time ago if I didn't, if it was just about me being overnight success, because you can't farm and make wine like as an overnight quote unquote success. And I worked my ass up to this point. So I just can't, I have a vision, and I'm so tunnel focused that I'm a human being, and stuff, of course, like that bothers me and drives me crazy. But then when I think about it, I'm like, I don't need to prove myself to anyone, because I think that I proved myself up to this point.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But people, like I said, you just come on the scene now, and it had to be acceptance. You had to prove yourself. There had to be consistency,
Right.
All that's happening. And then when you have people like Jenny, left court from Jenny and Francois, who has a legit portfolio,
Right.
And takes you on and keeps you on and is a big advocate, that's a big deal. I never ask this question to my guests, but it's such crazy times. With everything going on now, I mean, what are the things that are currently on your mind? I mean, things that you think about over and over. I know in normal circumstances, whether it's harvest or business, production or whatever, but there's just so many things going on. I mean, do things roll through your mind that sort of reoccur that are timely?
Yeah, I think that, I started on this journey 10 years ago. I'm turning 36 in a month and some change.
You old.
I know, exactly.
No, you're not. No, you're not.
And everything that that when I started this journey was to something that just happened. We planted 2,000 vines a little over a month ago, and I now everything that I worked for the last 10 years has came into fruition, and I can't. There's no important time there. It's always been an important time, but the fact that in a time like this, that my team were like, we had lunch from the vegetables that we grew from one of the hugelkultur beds for one of the vineyards we manage, and we're out in the back of the fallow land of this land foraging apples, and we in a time like this, California is literally on fire, which is where I'm, that's my home state, and I'm here in Vermont, and at the cost of being around, not being away from my family, all my dreams and all the hard work I put into everything's working out, but it's at the cost of being away from people who stuck, who my family, but I couldn't imagine any other time for me to say that I have my own land to farm and grow and to cultivate with people, because I don't think there's anything more political right now than to have suffrage in a place that you could call your own.
Yeah. Let's get a little deeper in that. Let's talk about our industry. From your perspective, why is there still substantial racial and gender inequality and injustice in the food and wine system? I mean, it's been magnified, lately, which is great, and there's been activism, which is great. But it's just not reflective of a level playing field. What's your thoughts about that? I mean, are you... I don't want this to sound the wrong way, but are you away from it a little up in Vermont?
No, I'm a black queer woman in America. I can never be away from it.
But in Vermont, which may be the whitest state.
Exactly. Well, I mean, so that doesn't fall. That is it. Yeah, I could, no matter, I could change my winner's view in America, but I'm still a black queer woman in America. So that doesn't mean, the whitest state in the union, that presented as also the most liberal, which comes with its own issues, just like this industry.
But all your friends in New York, everyone in New York, in the restaurant business, the wine business, there's this whole patriarchy and gatekeeping thing, that still seems to exist. Yes. You agree?
It exists. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I more or less don't. I have been able to, just so I've navigated life, I don't need any of them. Gatekeepers. And meaning I purposely try to position myself that I don't need you, and I don't need your support. I don't need your charity. I don't need your approval for me to do what mostly also, especially the work, the work of my ancestors, aka farming. And the industry is reflective of what the world is. And I think that the industry, thought for some reason that they were above what this country is. And if anything, I feel what's been exposed, this last year is that it's actually, it perpetuates it within this industry. And, it was disgusting, even in navigating this industry, like to navigate those things you listed, but to have people up in arms, literally, or people try to destroy the people's careers over fucking sulfur is, I think, the epitome of this industry.
Yeah. I mean,
while there's people dying and there's people literally getting shot in the back, and that's the things that people still talk about. And I still think this industry is very performative and not done anything. There's a lot of silence. There's literally people who have removed themselves from Instagram, I think, to avoid either being called out or to avoid engaging.
Or not looking the way,
yeah,
or
exactly.
being what it should be, because it used to be so showy. Now, I'm glad they ran away from that.
Yeah.
I mean, do we think things are changing? Are they changing fast enough? Are they changing at all?
Time will tell. I mean, it's so raw right now. I mean, we're in an election year. We're literally in a civil rights movement and in the middle of a pandemic. I hope that, by the time, on the other side of this, which maybe years, that there is some self-reflection from all of us. And what are we doing and why are we doing what we're doing? Mimi Castell just did a blog post, released yesterday. And I think she's one of the only people who actually gets it.
Yeah. Well, you should be all the talking, but I'll jump in and say that it kind of works from the inside out. And the way you've built your business addresses all these issues. And you'll explain, what's important to you is diversity, gender equality, how you treat your people. I mean, talk to me a little about how you structured your business, and that if everybody took a little of that, we'd certainly be on the right footing, right?
Yeah, I structure my business as I navigate through this world, and not instead of covering up my identities of how I navigate, like highlighting them, because that's the real world. The real world is not in a room where a certain class of people, a group of people are sharing wines and eating oysters. That's not the real world, but that's the world that we all participate. Still, we participated in and still participate in, and that's still all. That's the pleasure of what we do. But me getting access to land, people even the haters of me, or say I'm a overnight success, not knowing I just literally has fought for the same thing you have, to be able to farm and make wine. That's all I wanted. And then along the way, the way I structured my business is to not have people go through the things that I had to navigate going through, and changing the culture. We're bringing in 5 seasonal employees, and they're literally seasonal employees getting paid $20 an hour, not volunteering, not I'm going to give you a place to sleep and eat, and that covers your labor, but your body has been used to harvest grapes that I will make money from. That's undeniable, and that my bottle of wine costs $45. You're not paying $45 because I was on the fucking Today Show. It's because I provide health insurance and a livable wage for my employees and time off. And that is that's sustainability. It's beyond farming organically. It's about what truly do you see as equity. And it's me, I think it's my responsibility. And I made mistakes along the way, just as a business owner, as a manager. And, like I said, for all of us to be introspective during this time, it's a pivot we all need to make. What do we mean when we say sustainability, especially within our sector, within the quote unquote natural wine world? Right.
And, you're a woman-owned business. You have an eye towards making sure that, the business is dominated by and with women.
Yes.
Plus all the care towards, your help, the recognition and all of that. That was my point. I mean, if everybody viewed their business, with most of those ideals, I mean, it would be, or most of those actions, it would be a better world. So kudos to you. You brought something. Yeah, well, you're doing well, and you're doing better than most, and you'll only be more enlightened and do more better things. So it's good. You mentioned organic and biodynamic. Before we talk about Zafa and Co a little more in detail, I think you're a good person to talk about regenerative and sustainable farming. I need you to just take a second to explain to everyone what it is, and then, how you follow these practices, and maybe someone can explain to me why everyone isn't following these practices. So talk to me, about literally, the fields and the farming.
For Zafa, when we say that we practice some regenerative farming practices with organic and biodynamic philosophies, it's, based and foremost, it starts first and foremost with the soil. And instead of eradication, it's mitigation and utilizing what's around you. Instead of eradicating what's around you, it's mitigating what's around you by utilizing it. And it's observation, reacting instead of eradicating and before. And so we lost 2.5 acres of fruit yesterday.
But this isn't the first time you've had a fruit problem like that. Once was with bugs. Tell about yesterday, and just throw in the other story.
Yeah, yesterday, I'm trying to figure out a way. We don't use tractor and aisle at all. So the vineyards that we have, that we are currently regenerating, were previously farmed at one point in time conventionally. The Huntington vineyard that I'm about to talk about had no activity at all, abandoned for 2 years. This is now the second that we've been in it, and the only time we've only had a tractor in it 4 times. So basically, just avoiding compaction. We do everything by feet, even we with the to mitigate powdery, downy black rot. We rotate biweekly sulfur. And nettle, horsetail tea, and regalia, which is a biofungicide made from knotweed. I do not use copper, and we do everything.
Those are all things to fight fungus and bugs and all that, right?
And so this year was a hot, was very, very warm here. So we literally had only we rotated those 2 3 times, and we spray by foot, backpack. Right now, and I'm utilizing the sites that, along the way until I was able to plant my own vineyard, which we just did, a couple of weeks ago. I'm utilizing the sites that we started leasing as a study to see literally how many people, if I continue to not use tractor and aisle, how many people will it take to do a biofungicide spray on foot, using a backpack instead of a tractor. So anyway, and then along with that, birds. So I utilize the Huntington site as a test site to not use netting, do netting, and how can we mitigate birds without putting on nets. And
is netting like an unnatural thing? Like you shouldn't have to net?
Just
you want to figure out. Go ahead.
Yeah, that the word natural is, trick is it's I'll speak to this. Times that I was in Texas, when you have to, lift up the nets when it's time to harvest, and you're seeing, there's birds that are dead in there, or you're having all through the growing season when you're having to save birds because they get caught in, is not fun, and is not something that I actively want to do for the next 20 years. And, and there's other farmers that I've, talked to in ways that they've mitigated birds, just putting a manufactured body of water somewhere inside the vineyard that they're attracted to. All they want is water. They're actually not sitting there eating grapes.
So because of the liquid in the fruits,
yeah,
they go to right.
Yeah, and they know the sugar is there, so then it's liquid. And so I use the Huntington site as a way to, which is 3 acres, which I get to use as a prototype for the 10 acres that we're planting here, as how can I use this as a way that when on our own site, what will work and not work.
Right.
That's, we arrived and I walk out with my team. We have our macro bins back of the truck ready to go plant. And I knew that there's, the birds were in there, but, we were there on Friday. I checked the bricks and the pH, everything was ready. We called the pick for Monday. We arrived there, called the pick for Tuesday and arrived there, and all the fruit was gone besides in the Petite Pearl because the sugar's not there yet. And my vineyard and my vineyard manager, he broke down crying, and he was still crying. He was still upset that he still cried this morning, and I had to have a talk with him. He's like, I hope I can get to the place where you are, that you're not. And I was like, I made a choice, and I had to sit with my choices, and the choice not to net. I was like, I could have told you guys net, 3 weeks ago, and I sit with my choice, and it's
right.
That vineyard is regenerating itself, and I'm not where that wasn't, that harvest was not for the yield, and we look out there, we look at the way that vineyard looked 2 years ago and where it looks right now, and it's healthy as fuck. And like I explained to him, that's what we worked our ass for that year, to get that vineyard healthy again. The fruit,
right.
It will come. And this year I didn't, communicate to them like that was like, not that I didn't care that we lost fruit, but I'm not, I wasn't betting on that fruit. All of our energy is for the health of it. And to me, if anything, if that could, any intel of like where my frame of thinking is, the way that I'm farming and truly trying to think regeneratively, and especially in the context of the soil, I took a chance, and the fruit's gone, but the vineyard is healthy as fuck, and I could sleep with that.
Right, in the long run.
Yeah.
But boy,
yeah,
you're a saint and you're patient.
Yeah, I need to know what I'm going to do next year, though. Like, I'm not going to lie, I have a year to figure that out.
We ain't doing this bird thing every year.
Exactly. Yeah.
then it'll get crazy.
My team would kill me. Like, they're breaking their backs out there, and I'm just doing experiments. No, I can't. So I have to.
You have to feel for them.
And that's when I make a decision. I might net next year, but that's just But those are the things you learn, and that's the beauty and tragedy of farming,
Yeah. Let's talk about Zafa wines. You got into it a little, but we'll get even into more specifics. It doesn't seem like it, but I'm curious. I mean, has the pandemic affected you or the winery, the business in any way? I mean, anybody get sick? Did it affect, selling?
No, we've done quarantining. From a business perspective, I feel from a fiscal business perspective, has not affected the business. I have no problem being honest with that. Yeah.
That's great. I don't think Vermont's much of a hotspot either, but either way, it could happen anywhere. So you've talked about this. I want to get a little more specific. You've been leasing land from growers, hundreds of acres. But you talked about, and tighten it up a little, about you purchased a substantial plot to grow your own grapes. What are we talking about? 50 acres or so?
56 acres, and with the aid of the Vermont Land Trust, we closed on 56 acres. I think it's been a blur, but it was about a month ago. It's been a blur because we got the keys on a Friday, and then on that Monday we started planting 2003.
Right, wine. Which you had mentioned that. Is that Isle Lamont?
Correct. Yes, that's Isle Lamont.
Oh, okay. Now, when you said Huntington is one of the leased properties?
Yeah, it's about 20-year-old vineyard, one of the oldest vineyards here, which is crazy because Vermont, when you say oldest vineyard somewhere, you're talking about hundreds of years. Here, it's right. One of the oldest vineyards is 20-something years old, yeah.
So what do you think the new property, how long is it going to take before you think you could pull grapes off and make wine?
That's a good question because we planted, because with one thing COVID did is we were supposed to close on the property in July. June, actually. Then it got pushed to July. And then, by the time we went to plant, I consulted with another grower here with a horticulturist that we got the vines from. And they're like, you're going to plant in August. You could mark it off your list, but you're not going to get anything out of this year. So meaning like pushing us back a year from planting. And
right.
Because the climate, we planted on that first planting on that Monday. And then that next day we got torrential rain, a storm came through. And,
does that screw things up?
No, I'm not going to lie though. Like, I fought for this property, Isle of Mott sits on the oldest coral reef in known at this moment, which is also makes it the most diverse soils. And I chose the site for specifically the soil and then the warming effect because the proximity of the land to the water. But I'm convincing, talk to the land trust, and their understanding of the soil series is all with annuals and not, their understanding of even with vines in relation to soil is still something that we're all learning about here with these particular cultivars. And so I fought for that soil, blah, 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 blah. And I still have imposter syndrome. And when we had that rain, I walk out there and I'm like, I walk out there by myself, play it cool with my team. And, I'm just basically hoping I fought for this soil. So I planted on silty loam and sandy loam. And if there's puddles of water out there, then I got this all wrong. And you would never even know that, we got 3 inches the day before. And that was
it drained beautifully.
Completely beautifully. And,
wow.
And so with that, you
nailed it.
It made me cry, honestly. So it was like I exhaled. It was like I fought for this shit, and it goes back to overnight success. But that overnight success doesn't come with understanding and truly putting my heart in researching the soil series and these. And anyway, I digress. But it was something I still I had to. It was emotional for me because this is what I've been wanting, what I've been fighting for all this time, and then so we finished the plan. It took us 4 days to do the 2,000 something vines, and we consistently would get 80 degrees, peak in the day, and then rains. And right now the vines are probably about 6 inches, and we already knocking flowers off of them. So we got this is the first leaf, so we could count this as a vintage. And so I'm like, all the people said that I was, that was not going to work. It's like another way of saying look at me now. And so and that's for my team too. And so with that being said, we'll continue, drop fruit. And if anything, we do a harvest, it'll be in 2023, sorry.
Okay.
So in the 3rd year. Yeah. But I wanted to be a full harvest. I wouldn't expect even a full tonnage out of that until 2024, 2025, but they're really vigorous. So it's hard to tell. And I will say, and when we're going to plant more, we're going to plant more next year. And something, I was even talking to my team about today is that, we're being told we plant in June. And it's what it taught me is that this particular site, maybe the best time to plant is not in June. It's for us, maybe in August, considering the success that we have with this planting.
You may have stumbled on. It's such a learning process, right? I mean, you get forced to do one thing and it may be a benefit. Krista, we have to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll get into, more of Zafa Wines and a bunch of other things. We're talking to Krista Scruggs from Zafa Wines and Cellars. You're listening to The Grape Nation on Heritage Radio Network. We'll be right back.
I'm Lisa Held, a food journalist and podcast host, presenting Behind the Label with American Humane. Produced by Heritage Radio Network for Springer Mountain Farms, this podcast series dives into what the American Humane Certified label really means. We're looking inside the farm certification process, beginning with the moment a farmer expresses interest in becoming American Humane Certified, all the way to a consumer seeing the seal on store shelves.
And American Humane is our country's first national humane organization, founded way back in 1877. Now we certify nearly 1 billion farm animals each and every year. Despite that growth, roughly 90% of U.S. farm animals are still raised without the benefit of independently verified science-based standards.
Subscribe to Behind the Label with American Humane wherever you listen to podcasts.
Okay, we're back. We're back with my guest, Krista Scruggs. Krista from Zafa Wines and Cellars in Vermont. Are you going to build a winemaking facility on the new property?
Oh, yeah. So right now, actually, my My team is, I think that is right. I can hear them. They're about to start grinding pears and apples right now. So, the home is being converted completely to a kitchen, tasting room, and a winery.
So when
So,
you say home, there was a physical building on the property?
yeah, I'm now currently sitting in what can be considered the den of the physical property. Yeah.
Are you going to live there? Are you living there,
I'm
or
living here
it's
right now. I'll be here through the whole transformation to the
sounds
winery
cool?
and the tasting room. We have two other structures. We have two barns, larger barns. The larger barn will be for barrel storage and for the lab for the winery. And then the garage is being converted completely to the winery. Downstairs is being converted to the tasting room, and then upstairs will be office and then housing for the staff. And
So
then
you had a head start with some of the buildings there, or some of the cool.
It's worked out. I couldn't.
Are you
Yeah.
going to put housing on the property?
Yes, that's the plan.
Cool.
Yeah.
We talked about regenerative and sustainable. Now that we're talking about wine, I mean, just talk to me about practices in the cellar. I mean, we're talking natural wine. You try to do everything cyclically, naturally. Just explain what you're doing in the cellar that follows that path.
For example, yesterday we harvested from our Northfield, one other vineyards I released in Northfield. We harvested La Crescent and Marquette. After we did 3/4 of the La Crescent harvest, we actually stomped that out there out in the vineyard. And because I wanted to get fermentation started out there, and we then
Is doing it outside literally, does that make fermentation quicker?
Who knows? I mean,
Maybe not.
no,
Okay,
no one knows. No,
nothing definite.
Yeah,
Okay.
anyone's answers that no one but
Okay.
and then the rest of it's whole cluster, and we picked all of Marquette, whole cluster, brought that back into the cellar, put the so I'm doing a semi-carbonic. So the juice from the La Crescent will then inoculate. It will inoculate the fermentation for the carbonic fermentation that we're doing in the vessel.
Now explain carbonic fermentation.
In simple terms, it's fermentation starting inside the berry. Inside
the berry itself.
Yes.
Now, is the top of is it a covered? Do you have to cover the top of
an anaerobic environment?
Tank?
So it needs to be completely closed, sans oxygen.
Right. And it's definitely a style. It's definitely a great style. Definitely a style in favor right now. What, in your description, carbonic maceration does what to the taste, the mouthfeel, the body of a wine?
If anything, at least for me, why with these cultivars we're working for, I wanted to basically lift the fruit. It highlights the fruit, in my opinion.
Right.
Yeah.
You mentioned a few grapes. There's some pretty interesting grapes in Vermont, and I think you've made your name by, making grapes that come from Vermont. These are hybrid grapes. You mentioned a couple. Let's just go through the names of some of the grapes that you've been working with. You mentioned La Crescent. Was that one of them? I mean,
yeah. And
how many different grapes are you working with?
Well, we just planted alone 7, and one of our sites there's 11 different.
Really?
And these are all.
You said La Crescent was a descendant of what?
Muscat.
Okay.
Marquette is the grandchild of Pinot. So, for those who are listening, with hybrids, French American hybrids, it's a horticultural cross between indigenous grapes here, which we know as like Riparia or Lambrusca, and then crossed with multiple times with different vinifera, which some is known as Pinot or Cabernet, and it's also not just the Lambrusca and Riparia indigenous. There's multiple indigenous varieties crossed with multiple vinifera varieties until it makes, for example, a Marquette.
But these are grapes that have been crossed for many years, right?
Yes,
I mean,
correct,
you're not necessarily doing that or the grafting. These are the grapes that have sort of been, grown as hybrid grapes through the years or made hybrid grapes, correct?
Right. Yeah. The University of Minnesota and Cornell, I think, should take all the credit for that they've been crossing and crossing and crossing. And it takes years and years and years to cross.
You talked about the new, vineyard that you planted. What did you plant a variety, different rows of different grapes? I mean, how did you plant
Yes.
the new property?
For example, we planted 7 different cultivars in La Crescent. I put that on 3 different, there's working right now currently on 3 different soil series. And I particularly want to see how La Crescent showed itself on 3 different soil series. I did.
Interesting.
I did plant, I start with Marquette which is a red grape. And then I went to La Crescent, which is a white grape. And then went to Frontenac, which is a red grape. Then went to Tosca, which is a white grape. And I entered and I split them all up so I could see how they do on the silt and only do on the loam. And so for each varietal, I am going to be able to see how they do respond on the sandier loam of the soil and the siltier loam of the soil. And in La Crescent, I'll see it on all 3.
Right.
So it was and everything's planted from north to south. It's like, and I, when we were out there doing the rows, I literally was out there with them. My team probably hated me, but I was putting my compass on the ground to make sure that they hit that angle.
It's the only way to tell.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's the only way to tell. But the good old fashioned compass.
Exactly.
Now, to that point, because there's a little experimentation, how the grapes are going to react, how you plant them. You're one of these guys that doesn't make the same wines every year. I mean, let's face it, you haven't done 20 vintages, but
right.
In the handful you've done, it doesn't reoccur necessarily, except for maybe 1 or 2 things. Why is that?
One, I think it started as circumstance, because as someone who didn't have their own land and, hustling to farm someone's acre or 3 acres that they didn't no longer want to touch, or sourcing group of fruit from whatever grower that I could get that was, farming in a way that was suitable to my standards. I more or less, I didn't have a choice. And then I realized that what a beautiful place to be, because I'm already, I'm already working with grapes that luckily don't have a standard that I have to live by. And then 2, because we're all still in this region learning about these grapes, we're just barely like in the context of like comparative vinifera, we're just still a sperm that's swimming around, and it has even
right.
and so why would I limit myself into one way of making something when we have so much to learn? And there's even ways that I've done fermentations that I don't have examples of, and there's ways that Deirdre set the path for certain ways of doing things, and Ethan has set in the fable, and the beauty is we all get to figure out exactly how these grapes work for the style wine we're trying to make. But I still don't want to be limited within that. I don't want to be limited to what style of make that I want to make, because mostly that's that vintage was should tell me more than me trying to recreate that Jungle Fever, and it was the Jungle Fever 2017 that really much changed.
Jungle Fever is one of your wines. And that's one of the reoccurring wines, right?
Right. To the one 2019 I just released, it's the only one I named the same, and the only reason I named it the same because it's to honor the fact that wine, when I poured it in a Brumaire, that's when the right people tasted it, and it
right.
put my name out there. So it's an ode to what many things kicked off my career, but at the back of the 2019 vintage, I put my aim is not to be consistent, and
right.
It's a different blend each year, and it's mostly just I don't want to be limited to try to chase something that that quote unquote gave me success, or I'm not trying to chase the best of a vintage. I'm just trying to make the best one of that vintage, and what that means, I think that vintage should tell me that, and not me trying to chase quote unquote perfection.
That's exactly it. It's what you're dealt, not, what you could mold it into, the
Exactly.
same thing or some, which is great. And I guess you're going through so much new stuff that, it continues to be a learning process.
And it's fun. And I think it pushes me and more than anything. And, I am curious about when, 4 years from now, I will have a state fruit that I will, I'm not driving up and down the state, from the sites that we farm. I will have fruit that I intentionally planted, intentionally wanted to see how they did in this style of way. And I do wonder, 5 years from now, what does that look like? When I have a state fruit, that I will have the same fruit every year. And I just hope my intentions through my intentions through my fermentation style, that I continue to stand by this philosophy that I have. I think, you never know. So we'll listen to this 5 years from now.
It'll be interesting. If I'm still doing this, I'll have you on. But I know this, besides minting grapes, you have a pretty serious focus on apples. True?
True.
How did this come about?
Once again, circumstance. The first was supposed to be my first vintage. I'd left to go to Texas to work on my project there.
We lost her. Amanda, you there?
Yes.
There you are.
Yeah. Vintage I was supposed to be managing. We lost all the foliage to Japanese beetles, which is a common pest in vineyards, in particular out here. And so I was, with the encouragement of Deirdre at the time, was left to what was the only fruit that was available here in Vermont that you could just get, at the side of the road and in someone's backyard orchard, which was apples. And I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I just fermented it in the way that the way I knew at the time how to ferment wine. And, I saw, and tasted, of course, Deirdre and Fable Farm, doing, and even Shaftesbury do too, grape skins with wine, fermenting grapes, macerating grape skins on wine juice, the juice itself. And I just, that first in 2017, I was curious about doing a grape must to apple mash co-fermentation, and just I had nothing to lose at that point in time. What I had to lose, and
throw it in the pot, right?
Yeah, exactly.
See what happens. Yeah.
Intentionally, but without what the fuck, and
maybe it'll be good.
Yeah, and if not, I'll be exactly where I started. I didn't lose anything, and but I gained a lot. And that include, falling in love with apples. With this property, we there used to be an orchard here, and then there was actually, and then after that, there are cows here, and those cows then, from eating apples, they shed and the seeds spread, and there's trees that are 20 years old that seeded themselves, and so now instead of driving up down Vermont foraging apples, my team's out there foraging and 30 acres of fallow land of wild fruit right now. And just to to bring that to circle and know that I with the vineyard out there now, and then we have our own wild apples we can forage from and grow from and bring and regenerate. We'll start pruning them next fall. I also planted an acre of apple trees at the Clemens family farm, a partnership that I have here in Vermont. So I definitely have an affection towards apples, mostly because they saved me. My career, it changed my career, and it changed my perspective of fermentation, of limitation. That what is wine, and it's not limited to just grapes, and that just set me on a whole nother path, it seems.
Yeah, that's part of the sort of the new American wine revival. It's not just wine. It's fermentation.
Exactly.
All right, I want to try to get to our weekly wine list because I'd love to get your take on a few things you're drinking. But before we get to that, I have one more question. And I've been doing the show, this will be our 4th year, And one of the things that I've learned and I've morphed towards is natural wines, understanding them, consuming them, talking to people, knowing a lot, more about it. But it's very polarizing. And even the term natural wine, which you use freely, and you have you have all the cred to do that. But, how do you define it? I mean, I guess we talked about it, how you farm and how you cellar, right? I mean, is it still fair to call it natural wine as long as you walk the walk?
It's because, it's because if I'm being frank, I like that. I think about the natural wine. I think the natural wine community, and I just hope that even that how do I phrase this? With everything's happening in the world, and I hope some self-reflection. I just hope that people actually just move away from even defining that, and just defining how are you showing up as a human being. And
right, it applies almost anything.
Exactly.
Natural wine, natural people.
Exactly, and so I just if you're gonna rock that word, then fucking rock it all the way, and think about actually how are you from your teammates, your employees, your individuals in this community, our colleagues. There's so much drama in this industry, and it's just if we just focus on actually naturally just treating each other good and well, and then that to me that word to hold more weight. And I think it's I don't know, I don't know if I'm even answering the question right. It's just
no, it's very well said, because the answer is deeper than just low intervention or no pesticides. You kind of hit it on the nose. It's very organic beyond organic farming.
Yeah, I would honestly, I would rather there's someone who's farming who's putting, if someone's putting 100 ppm of sulfur in their wine, and farming IPM, and they're paying an equitable wage to their employees and take care of the people around them, I would rather support that person than someone who's saying that, wearing this badge of quote unquote natural wine and doing the exact opposite of how they're treating the people around them and their employees.
I agree. All right, we have maybe 7-8 minutes left. I want to do the wine list. I'm going to ask you 5 questions. I ask the same 5 questions to every guest. We've asked over 200 people these 5 questions. We post them on social media. People, after listening to Krista, they will love knowing what Krista's drinking. Don't dwell on these answers. Just buzz through them. So the first question is, what are you drinking now? What's in the fridge? What are you trying? What's seasonal? What's a thing to you now?
Oh, I just threw away a bottle. What did we just have the other? Oh, what a question.
Not that specific. It doesn't have to be that one bottle, but is it beer? Is it cider? What are you drinking now?
Beer. I'm beer, and mostly because I'm just trying to repair my relationship with beer. Beer. I've been drinking a lot of beer lately.
Is it cheap Bud Light, or you take advantage of the fact that Vermont's a great, craft brewery?
I have a focal banger. Actually, right now I have a focal banger right now, the Alchemist, right in front of me. But there's some Coors inside the drawer right now too. If I'm being honest.
Alchemist are the guys that make Heady Topper, right?
Yes.
So they're pretty happening. All right, so you're drinking beer now. It's a good thing to drink during the harvest. All right, second question, goofiest of the bunch. Do you have, maybe it goes back to a kid or, a few years, do you have a favorite wine and food pairing?
Oh, pizza.
Is there something,
everyone knows I love pizza. So pizza and wine,
what's the perfect alcoholic drink with pizza?
Wine.
But what?
Oh.
Don't be so general. What? Lambrusco, champagne? Give me something.
I actually like a good Beaujolais with pizza.
Okay, that I think I take. Do you have any faves on the Beaujolais front?
No, I don't want to answer that. I hate having.
Okay.
Yeah.
No,
I do, but I don't. Yeah.
Okay, that's I have trouble asking that question sometimes.
Yeah.
And maybe this one will even fall into that. Do you? Because I don't want you to be exclusive, but do you have a favorite wine restaurant and or bar, a place where they have the selection, they have the service, they have the knowledge, they have the vibe? Is there anything up there,
Yeah,
when you come?
Daedalus
Go ahead.
wine, like they're truly my family here. Daedalus wine shop.
DED. Spell for me.
Dedalus.
Okay. Daedalus wine.
Wine shop.
And that's in Burlington?
Yeah, we're right down the street from Cellars. Yeah.
From Cellars. Yeah, I've heard of them. It's nice to hear that, and we'll give them a shout out. Fourth question. We ask people their favorite all-time wine. Now, let me go backwards on this. When I structured the question was really to incite people to tell me about the most expensive and rare wine they ever had, because I have Psalms on the show and winemakers. But it morphed into something more important, which is what's a wine, throughout your life or your career or whatever that was important or life-changing or continues to resonate with you? You have one?
I think, and it's interesting. So I would just say literally anything, it would change my life. Why I'm doing what I'm doing is because I'm from California. And for me, and I probably still won't be surprised to say this, but when I see a Robert Mondavi bottle, it just brings me back to that was on my table growing up as a kid.
Right.
And
so that
as a Californian and there's not gonna be one particular bottle, but just it's that Robert W. means something to me in a way as a California native, and growing, even though he was not, Constancy Brands ended up buying the private selection,
right?
And then when I started working with Constancy Brands, that was a huge deal for me as is that I was being a part of something that was something so embedded in me, that didn't grow up with anyone in the wine industry, but I grew up in the middle of wine culture, rather,
so
economically.
The answer to that is very clear to me. It's more about the wine that was around that you remember that had an impact. Who was bigger than Mondavi in those days? It was ubiquitous.
Right.
So that's an important wine to you. I totally get that.
Right.
All right, last question. Can you recommend best wine around $15-20 retail, a red and a white? Through your travels, my kids are in their 20s. They can't go and bring supermarket wines to parties or dinners, but they can't spend, $40. What do you think are good value wines? A red and a white, and you can be category like Muscadet is, a great white. But in your mind, tell me a good value red and a good value white. Can you think of that?
Oh, that's a good. So it doesn't have to be. It could be stylistically, but not
Yeah, it could be anything.
I still, honestly, you could. You could get a pet nat, and I'm not drinking. I personally am not drinking pet nats left and right, but I think that
pet nat's a great value, right?
Yeah, it's a good value.
It's a sparkler. It could be white or with color.
It serves its purpose, I think, and there's.
You got to answer the question. You got another idea like that?
No, I think that I'll stick with
it. It goes both ways. I'm going to take that.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Good job on that. And like I said,
I was so nervous.
No. That was the whole point, not to be nervous. Like I said, we're going to post it on our social media sites, within the next week. Krista, we got to wrap up. That's an hour. I told you it'd go fast. Let me do a quick wrap up, and then I want to get some info from you. If you have a question, suggestion, wine happening, or event, hit me up at sam@thegrapenation.com. That's sam@thegrapenation.com. Subscribe to the Grape Nation podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you get your pods. Follow us on Facebook at The Grape Nation. On Instagram, we're at SBenRuby. On Twitter, we're at BenRuby. But you can always use the hashtag The Grape Nation to get to us on both. Like I said, we'll post Krista's wine list on our social media sites. Krista, this is important. Your wines are very sought after. You're not a big production guy. But if people want to know more about your wines, your story, and where even to try to get them, where can we find more about Zafa and Co., and where can we find you on social media?
For more information about the wines and actually to get first dibs, it's go to zafawines.com and sign up for the newsletter. I really do honor that. We do drop wines first and foremost to our newsletter subscribers and people who are in our wine club. And then following me on...
The wine club is Counterspellers?
Correct. Yeah, Counterspell.
Okay.
Yeah.
Counterspell.
Correct. And we're actually going to open more seats to that soon because we realize there's a high demand for that. And keeps us also to have a more personal relationship with the people who want our wines. So
Nice.
staying like ZafaWines.com and sign up for newsletter. Like we really do. We take care of you guys there. And then follow me on Instagram, me and my team. Zafa is not just me. I have 7 people that make this all happen that should get more credit than I do sometimes. So
you're rarely in a lot of the posts.
Yeah.
I mean, you throw it around to your guys a lot, which is nice. So
Zafa,
that's at Zafa Wines.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we got the website. We got the Instagram. If anybody wants to stay on top. And you can go to Google and Google Krista Scruggs Today Show, and you could see her appearance on the Today Show a couple of weeks ago. That was interesting. All right, Krista, we got to go. I want to thank our guest, Krista Scruggs, from Zafa Wines and Cellars. I love what you're doing.
Thank you.
So good luck, continued luck. Promise me one thing, and this is a promise that has to be a promise.
What's the promise?
I will be coming up to Vermont sometime in the next year or two when the life gets to normal. You'll show me around and let me taste a couple of things?
It would be that's what I would love.
Okay.
To. Yes, please.
All right,
yes,
I'm going to come to you with.
Please, yes, please. I would love that. Yes.
I wish it could be like next weekend,
Me too.
when harvest is over,
that.
but the world is so screwed up.
I was going to say that. Yeah.
So thank you to Krista. Thank you to our, as always, our engineer Amanda and everyone at the Heritage Radio Network. And one last shout out. I want to thank Eric Benny Bloom and Ryan Zoidis from the band Lettuce. They composed the new Grape Nation theme song. So, Krista, you are the first show with my new proprietary theme song.
And Eric has been supportive of me, too.
Yes, yeah, Eric opened a distributorship in Colorado.
Yeah,
good guys.
I wine.
Yeah, I'm sure you'd love to have your stuff if there is any. Yeah. All right, Krista, got to say goodbye. Thanks again. I'm Sam Van Ruby, and you've been listening to The Grape Nation. The Grape Nation is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. For our freshest content, subscribe to our newsletter. Enter your email at the bottom of our website, heritageradionetwork.org. Connect with us on Instagram and Twitter at heritage_radio. You can also find us at facebook.com/Heritage Radio Network. Heritage Radio Network is a nonprofit organization driving conversations to make the world a better, fairer, more delicious place. And we couldn't do it without support from listeners like you. Want to be part of the food world's most innovative community? Subscribe to the shows you like, tell your friends, and please join the HRN family by becoming a member. Just click on the beating heart at the top right of our homepage. And thanks for listening.